Hello and welcome. Finally, the time is here. After many weeks and months of preparation, I am proud and happy to welcome you to WIAL 2021, the global conference of the World Institute for Action Learning. My name is Peter Cavalier. I am the president of WIAL and also as director for WIAL Thailand, the host for this year's conference. You can probably not see it from my background, but I'm talking to you from Thailand. We have a great number of participants. I would like to show the audience, please. Can you take a look at who has joined us for this kickoff session? I know we have people from all around the world. Can you switch on your camera just for a minute and maybe wave to us? There you go. We have people from Australasia, from Asia. So good evening to everybody in Asia and Australasia. Good day to you in Europe and Africa and the Middle East. And probably a good early morning for our friends from the United States and Central America and South America. Last time I checked, we had 417 attendees signed up from 38 different countries. So I look forward to a great sharing and learning experience with you. We have a great kickoff session prepared. We're going to have two panel discussions, one looking back at the past and one looking at the future of WIAL and WIAL Action Learning, and one keynote speaker, Andrew Sobel, writer and author, who is going to be with us later for the keynote of today. First of all, in order to optimize your experience, we recommend that you watch the session on a computer, but that you also use the mobile device for networking, chatting, participating in the topics, and getting to know all the people in the conference, even if only virtually. So the theme for this year's conference is Building 2020 Vision for Leaders, Teams, and Organization, of course, through unleashing the power of action learning. I want to first of all thank our organizing partner, Kincentric, and all their offices around the world, as well as our sponsors, silver sponsors JBE and Tap Tour Asia from Thailand, and bronze sponsors Takeda from Thailand. Now, WIAL identifies action learning as a problem-solving process with a small group working on a real problem, taking action and learning as individuals and as a team while doing so. We believe that solving the problem and learning should have equal importance. Solving the problem creates the short-term benefit, relieves the pain, and learning at the individual, team, or organizational level is really what sets us up for benefits in the future. While action learning is surprisingly simple, we only have two very basic ground rules, and they are very well known by all our coaches around the world. The first one is that statements can only be made in response to questions, and that anyone can ask a question to anyone else, and that the action learning coach has the authority to intervene when he or she sees a learning opportunity. In order for action learning every time to be successful, we need 6 components or elements. They are the problem or the issue, a group of diverse people, 4 to 8 is the best number. We use questions, of course, that comes from the first ground rule. We take action after the session to make sure that the ideas we came up with are actually implementable and do solve our problem. Of course, the learning, as mentioned in the second ground rule, the role of the coach for the individual, team, and the organization. And finally, the action learning coach. In WIAL Action Learning, we always have an action learning coach supporting the team. And why do we think action learning is so fantastic? Because it creates benefits at multiple levels. First of all, in terms of breakthrough problem solving. Secondly, in terms of leadership development. Then building high-performance teams. Contributing to organizational learning. And finally, also impacting the community around. Many organizations now are using action learning as part of their CSR effort. I invite you to take a look at our website, probably after the kickoff session, where you will find more information. You can also sign up for our newsletter there that we issue 4 times per year. This email address, info@wial.org, is your best way to get in touch with us, and we will make sure that your query gets sent to the appropriate people. On the website, you will find testimonials from several organizations that have used action learning and that will share the benefits they got from it. We also have a YouTube channel. I invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as a LinkedIn page. as finally, of course, a Facebook page. Do make sure to follow and like these social media pages so that we can keep you abreast of what's going on. The best way to find out what action learning is to actually be part of a session. And some of you have, before this conference, signed up for a demo session. And I thank the coaches that volunteered to run those sessions. And I like the quote from Bob from Australia, who's probably in the audience. Thank you, Bob, for a great quote. If you try to explain action learning to someone, they might not get it. But as soon as they have experienced it, they will get it. And that magic seems to work every time. So if you have not yet had the chance to sign up for an action learning session, there will still be opportunities in the coming weeks. WIAL has a number of certified levels of coaches. Our flagship program is CALC, CALC, Certified Action Learning Coach. And based on experience, you can then move up to professional, senior, or master action learning coach. We also published this year our digital badges so that our coaches can show on their own social media pages how they are certified as an action learning coach. We work through affiliates. We currently have affiliates in the following countries. We have Germany coming up in just a few months. We're always interested to start new affiliates. If you don't see your country's name in here, feel free to contact us and to have a discussion about maybe starting a WIAL affiliate in your country. The WIAL affiliates run the public certification programs, and every affiliate will post on the website, you can find this page on the website, what programs they have upcoming. So come back to check that page to see when there's a program in your particular country. If there is no affiliate in your country, panic not. We now have a global program where people from anywhere, from any country, can sign up to join the CALC in a virtual setting. So if your country is not one where we have an affiliate, make sure to sign up and be part of the next batch of certified action learning coaches. Finally, for those of you who are in organizations, if you're looking for a certified action learning coach, again, on our website, there is a drop-down menu that says Find a Coach, and you can find there our certified action learning coaches from all around the world. You can browse by country, by city, you can look up for people by their name. So make sure when you have a need for a certified action learning coach that you check out our website and use somebody that is certified by WIAL. So that was my small introduction to give you some general background about WIAL and WIAL action learning. And I'm now very excited to start our first panel discussion with 3 people that were the co-founders of WIAL 15 years ago. And I'm very happy to welcome from the United States, Mike Marquardt, B. Carson, and Skipton Leonard. And they will be part of this panel discussion around the history of WIAL, 15 years of WIAL. So welcome B, welcome Mike, welcome Skipton. There they are. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can.
Okay, now we can. Good. That's the first problem solved. How you doing? So, how are all of you doing? Good, okay now? Can you hear me all right? Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Good. So thank you for joining us. The 3 of you created WIAL 15 years ago. We're going to have a number of questions and discussions to reflect back on those 15 years. But before we do that, I would like to invite each of you to take a minute or so, although many people in the audience know you, to take a minute or so to say who you are and what you've been doing. So let me start with Mike first. Mike, go ahead.
Okay, my name is Mike Marquardt, and I'm super excited to be part of this global conference. I was one of the 6 co-founders of WIAL and the first president from 2006 to 2015. I'm currently the chair of the Global Advisory Board for WIAL. I've been a professor at George Washington University. I retired a year ago. I'm the author of 26 books, 8 of which are about action learning. I'm very proud of those books. They've been translated into over a dozen languages. And so I'm pleased to be part of this panel this morning.
Thank you, Mike. And let's go to B first. B. Carson, second president. B, tell us a bit about yourself.
be Carson, and yes, I was the second president. I was very excited when Mike asked me to join with him in co-founding the Institute. It's been an amazing 15 years. I actually got introduced to action learning in 2002 when I went back for my doctorate, and Mike was one of my professors, introduced me to this process, and I was just totally enamored by the simplicity and the power of it. And so I've dedicated the rest of my life to action learning.
Indeed you have, indeed you have. Thanks, B. And then finally, Skip, one of the other co-founders of WIAL.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, and my background in action learning started in 1999 when I was working for a large consulting firm and I had proposed an action learning component, and I knew something about it, but we hired Mike Marquardt to come in and do some training at the point. So it was myself, and Arthur Friedman was also part of that group. And then 7 years later, we ended up founding the World Institute for Action Learning. Really exciting, because it seemed to me it was a culmination of much of what I had learned and knew and was practicing in terms of experiential learning. It was the next logical extension. So as with the other two panelists, I'm super excited to be talking with you what I remember about those early years.
Thanks, Skip. And again, all three of you, thank you. It's a bit early on the East Coast of the United States, I believe. We're really happy you're with us here. Now, let me ask the first question to Mike, because you were involved in preparing for the setting up of WIAL exactly 15 years ago. So what happened exactly in the years before that, Mike? How did you come to define action learning as it is defined and then ultimately start WIAL?
Well, I was first became aware of action learning in 1994, 12 years before the founding of WIAL. I had become a professor at George Washington University in their executive doctoral leadership program. And as a new professor, I was given two courses to teach. One was global human resource development, which I felt very comfortable with. I'd worked overseas in over 50 countries in the previous 20 years. The second course I was assigned was action learning. And I did not know what action learning was, but I was the professor of the course, and there were people like Carson, senior executives from around the world that would take this doctoral program. And they were expecting that the professor would be very knowledgeable about a course he or she was teaching. So I quickly said, what's the course? And the previous professor had retired, and they asked me to teach it, and they gave me the syllabus, which seemed fairly simple. I had 20 executives. I would break them into 4 teams, and each team would select a problem from within one of their organizations, and the other 4 would help the person solve the problem. And at the end of the semester, they would report the results in terms of a paper and presentation. And it worked great. I was overwhelmed by how well the group did in solving the problem and in working well together. And later that summer, I had an opportunity to go to a conference in London where I met Reg Revens, and there were about 20 of the other people that were involved in action learning at that time. And remember, in 1994, there were probably only 3 or 4 organizations around the world that used action learning or some form of action learning. And there were a number of universities that taught action learning. And so I read everything I could about action learning. I said, I'm going to take this to the corporate sector where I'd been working for 20 years. And I tried it there, and it didn't work very well. The people in the teams did not want to take time to reflect on learning. They didn't want to ask questions. They didn't want to, see how they could apply the learning. They just wanted to get together, solve the problem, and move on to the rest of their work. And so I realized that, I had to do a lot of work to make action learning work outside the academic field. And so for the next 10 years, I did whatever I could to make action learning as powerful as I could and as simple as I could. I worked with a number of organizations and kept adjusting, testing action learning, primarily with Boeing, but I also worked with Siemens and Panasonic. And every time I did action learning, I kept modifying it And eventually I developed this 6 components of action learning, which you've seen. And 3 of the components were kind of focused on action. And that's what corporations seem to focus on. You had an urgent, important problem. You had 6 or 7 people working on that problem. And then you had, some action that were taken. But the learning components were not there. And so I more or less said we have to have more learning so that we get the initial and immediate impact of learning on solving this problem, but the long-term benefits of action learning and the learning. So I developed this ground rule of having statements can only be made in response to questions, so I could assure that the people would take time to ask questions, learn from each other, work better as a team. I said that we have to have people have to develop as leaders, because most of the action learning that was beginning to occur in the late 90s was leadership oriented. And so I said we have to have leadership as part of the action learning. And then, but most of my time was developing the coach. What coach would do, what questions he or she would ask, and how they could be more powerful in helping this group learn while they solve the problem. And I began writing about action learning, spoke to conferences, and I realized in the early 2000s I need a lot of help. If I wanted to take this idea, this model globally, I need people like Skip with his tremendous background in groups and organizational leadership. He brought in a colleague, Arthur Friedman, who's probably the #1 person in the world in terms of group research, and other people. So we had a group of 6 people that enabled us to kind of take these initial ideas I had and make this into a global organization. So we moved from 6 people to now 600 coaches. And my hope and belief is that everyone in the world can benefit from action learning. I like to have all 8 billion people in the world receive action learning.
I hope that this conference will contribute to making all 8 billion people in the world become action learning coaches. So Mike, you gave the introduction and you mentioned Skip as one of the other people that you counted on to start officially WIAL. So that start was 15 years ago in 2006. So Skip, what memories do you have of that actual start of WIAL, the World Institute for Action Learning?
Well, it was one of those magical inflection points where everything came together. I had just, for the previous 12 years, had been in a fairly large consulting firm doing a fairly constrained, fairly small number of activities, and I was frankly looking for some challenge. And I talked with Mike, and it seemed like he was the same point. He was trying to expand action learning. So I remember the first meeting we got together, I believe it was in Arthur Friedman's condo. We all met together. We tried to decide what we were going to do. And we had decisions like, were we going to be a practice or an interest group, or were we going to be a certification organization? Now, mind you, all of us had been members of other previous organizations trying to do kind of the same thing, start a movement. So we all had a lot of experience of what worked and what didn't work. And I think we fairly quickly came to the conclusion that we wanted to be a organization that would develop, certify people to do this process, but it had to be more than simply taking a course, that they also had to demonstrate they could actually do this work. And that's where a fairly complicated process of trying to certify how people are, how competent people are to actually engage in action learning came about. I want to share, and one of the first things that happened was very instrumental. I had been a member of a fairly high-level HR organization that contracted with this fairly new World Institute for Action Learning to provide some training for, I think it was maybe 30 or 40 people. And we basically developed, Mike had some slides and I had some background in group process. So we put together, we had a rotating rooms where groups of teams would rotate from room to room. And in each room, somebody would be a problem presenter and somebody would be a coach, and we would coach the coach. And that ended up being the prototype for a lot of the training that went on afterwards, that we had people actually engaged in real action learning, problem solving as the primary way to learn how to do this, rather than sitting around and listening to experts, so-called experts in the field, tell them how to be action learning coaches. So those are the, I think the earliest things that I remember that were influential in my thinking about it as well as for the organization.
And then, B, you mentioned that you joined a little bit after the official start. So what if you think back about the 15 years of WIAL as an organization? What do you think were the main milestones that brought us from 2006 to where we are today?
Well, it started with us meeting around somebody's table. And initially, we actually started with a different name, and it took a couple months, and we finally settled on the World Institute for Action Learning, got it incorporated, and decided that one of the things that was important was that we be a not-for-profit, because we wanted to be an educational institute versus a consultancy. And so we were able to do that within several months. And then I think one of the other really big milestones was when we made the decision to split WIAL USA from WIAL. Initially, all the USA work was done through WIAL, and we realized that we were not that global presence as much as we wanted to be, even though we had affiliates in a number of countries at this point. I think by then we were up to about 6 countries where we had affiliates. We were still very DC centric. And so we made the decision to take WIAL USA out as a separate entity, abandon the current WIAL board, and re-establish it with affiliate leads from all over the world and make it truly a global board. And so at that point, we started doing all our board meetings virtually. So in terms of structure, those are the big things. Also, I think it was in 2016, we added the WIAL Better World Fund to better support not-for-profits. And the awards that are now coming through as part of the conference were not there initially. I forget what year we started those. But also the certification process itself has morphed over the years. Initially, it was 3 two-day classes, and now we've got all sorts of variations that are available. You can do it as 3 days, 3 days. You can do it as 4 days intensive. You can do it as 4s and 2s. And with COVID, we were able to shift to having a virtual platform fairly quickly, which was very exciting. And as I understand it, the next generation coming out is going to be a blended version. So I'm excited to see that coming. Even the levels of certifications have changed over the years. Initially, there were only CALCs and MALCs, certified coaches and master coaches. And then we realized we needed another level in between there, which was the birth of the senior coach. But senior coaches had to teach. And so there were experienced people that didn't want to be classified as certified coaches. They wanted a different title. And that was the birth of the professional level. We've also had lots of excitement with the number of countries that we've been established in. There are affiliates in 6 out of the 7 continents, and there have been global conferences all around the world these days. I understand next year is going to be the Caribbean.
We'll check about that. We'll check about that.
All right.
No, thanks, Dee, because like you said, now we do virtual CALCs training, we do virtual global conference. Who knows what the trend for the future will be. Thanks, Bea, for that. I want to go back to Skip, because we all know the action learning process quite well. I explained the ground rules, the components, but there's also been some evolution in the actual process, the one that we now teach to people to become action learning coaches. So Skip, what have been the main evolutions or changes in that actual WIAL action learning process?
Well, I'll give my perspective, and I think I'll leave some time for Mike and Bea to chime in. But for me, one of the fundamental steps forward was the ground rule that statements can only follow questions, and that anybody can ask a question. Those were fundamental and really changed the focus from what every other approach to team problem solving had been. And second was perhaps opportunistic, but as Mike tells it, one of his students or somebody affiliated tried to put into a script form what the action learning coach did, in the first session, and that became known as the script. And that was important because it allowed us to operationalize what we were doing. Now, along with that came a danger that it could easily become something rote or automatic and sort of take the creative part of coaching out of the process. I think that's something that we've sort of worked on over the years to make sure that it doesn't become a crutch, that it becomes something, a useful tool, but not a crutch that sort of tones down the creativity rather than increasing it. And the third thing I would point to was the way that the certification process began, and that was with that program back with that HR organization where we rotated people around and we actually had people working on real problems in real time, rather than just an exercise that was kind of the staple for an awful lot of training programs prior to that. So that right from the get-go, we threw people into action, had them process, had them design and what we learned from that process went into our certification program, and our whole program and presentations changed as a result of that. So I'll throw that over to Mike and B, what else they also saw as being evolutionary importance for WIAL.
Well, a couple of things I
Mike,
remember.
Mike, what do you want to add to that?
Yeah, a couple of things. When I first was developing, the coaches had certain questions to ask, and the very first question after the team had worked for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, how are we doing as a team, okay or not okay? And Skip added the thing. I think this is a time for a little bit different kind of question. On a scale 1 to 10, how are we doing? And that little change, I think, made the whole thing work much better, because people said, gee, we're not good, but I don't want to say we're bad either, but along the scale. And then in the script, we add a little bit more about leadership at the front, saying, identify your leadership skill. And at the end of the session, we'll ask others to give you, examples how you demonstrated that skill. And so there was a number of things we add to the script. I think it made the first session go much more smoothly and clearly. And as Skip indicated, we realized that as you go to session 2 or 3, you have to, an action learning coach has to be creative and adaptive, and so that they can respond to the situation in front of them. But I think over the years we keep improving the text, the script. We keep improving the training, particularly that we do for the coaches. And I think I've been amazed by how the quality of the training and the content of the training has significantly improved over the past 15 years.
All right, thanks for that, Mike. Now we have like 1 or 2 minutes left, so I'm going to move to my next question. We will have another panel in a few minutes, in quite a while actually, looking about the future. But while we have you here, I would like to have your thoughts, knowing that you've seen the last 15 years. What do you think is the key for WIAL in the next 15 years? And I'm going to go Mike, then Skip, and then B. So Mike, you first.
I think one important thing for me in the future is that we keep developing these great coaches. We have to find ways to provide support to them after they become certified, either in terms of having them be able to collaborate in their marketing, to update their skills, to encourage them to keep working and improving their coaching and expanding their coaching business.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay.
Skip, what about you?
Okay, so I have 2 main messages. One is that when we started, obviously, we were very interested in training coaches, and we also were interested in developing the visibility and the market for action learning. But I think, and over the years, we've gotten ahead of our game a little bit, and we need to focus more on developing the business of action learning so that there's enough activity to support the growth of a large global coaching cadre. And the second thing is branding. While action learning has a very clear brand, and we need to be careful not to have it diluted so that it just becomes another group facilitation process. If we do that, I think we're going to lose the clarity of what makes the WIAL approach to action learning so powerful.
Thank you, Skip. And B, I'll give you the final word and your final thoughts on the future of WIAL.
Well, everything Mike and Skip has said, and I think with the affiliate growth and development and bringing more affiliates on, we need tools that will make it easy for an affiliate to get up and running. So a toolkit, branding concepts, the easy plug and play kind of website concept. So things that just make it much easier for the affiliate to get started.
Okay, thank you, B. We look forward for you to stay on as participant, as guests to our conference, of course. Today, the kickoff session, and then the next 3 days. So thank you very much for your input so far. And from far away, a big hug and thanks for your contribution in the kickoff session. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Peter.
you.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you, Mike. So before we go to the first keynote of today, let me share a few more data points about the actual 3 days that will follow this conference. So can I have my slides, please? So the theme of our conference, Building 2020 Vision for Leaders, Teams and Organization through Unleashing the Power of Action Learning. Important for those of you who are interested in ICF CCE, the tomorrow, Thursday and Friday program is worth 9 ICF CCE. So those of you who want that certificate, make sure to contact the organizers after the event. I also want to highlight the great speakers we have for the next 3 days. We have total 24 speakers from 14 countries. There is, first of all, Angela McKenna from Salesforce, who will join us tomorrow as keynote speaker and explain how Salesforce is organizing itself and adapting to the new normal. And I really like the quote, success from anywhere. So it's not success from home, success from the office, it's just success from anywhere. On Thursday, we have Seymour Adler, Senior Partner at Kincentric, our organizing partner. And Seymour will talk about the rise of the caring, compassionate leader and share both practical experience he has and research data. And finally, keynote for Friday is Magdalena Mook, the CEO of ICF, the International Coaching Federation. And she will, of course, talk about coaching, but she will also explain how coaching is moving into the team coaching realm and how WIAL Action Learning is a great fit with the new leadership competencies proposed by ICF. We will also on Wednesday and Friday announce the award winners. Every year, B mentioned it before, we invite applications and a committee selects those applications that are declared the winners. So we're going to have Innovation Award, Application Award, Pro Bono Coaching Award, Affiliate of the Year, Coaching Excellence, each time with a runner-up. So all this is quite secret yet. Not many people out there know it. So stay tuned to find out who the award winners are for this year. We then go to a number of general sessions with speakers from around the world, sharing in 1-hour sessions, experience with breakout rooms in some cases. So we have Tuan from the Netherlands, Leo from the Philippines, Isa from Singapore, and Shannon from the UK, Alexandra from Poland, Helen or Hui from Vietnam, William from Malaysia, and Sophie from the UK. And the final session on the final day, Friday evening, has not just 1 but 2 speakers. Catherine and Vicky will share their experience of a leadership development program in the very specific space industry. And also a bit special, although everybody would like to travel to Thailand and we cannot, we have a team competition on each of the days of the conference offered by TAP Tour Asia, where teams will compete and virtually travel around the world. They will do that in a number of sections, and we will announce the winner of that team competition on Friday. And finally, we have a number of TED-style talks, 15-minute talks, very short and sharp, where a speaker will share an insight and experience and give you tips on becoming a better leader, team member, or as part of organizational development. So we have Dennis from the Russian Republic, Serene from Singapore, Jennifer from the UK, Napat from Thailand, Craig from the US, Magali from Brazil, Natawan from Thailand, Skip, who we just saw, will be back from the US, Suprince from China, Pirawan from Thailand, Danielle from France, and finally Marcel from the Netherlands. So this is the program for the next 3 days. Lots of variety in terms of speakers and topics. some of you joining us today have a ticket for just today for the kickoff session. You can still buy a ticket for the full program. And I also want to highlight that if you're afraid you cannot join all the sessions live, everything will be recorded and can be accessed through Whova for up to 3 months after the conference, of course, depending on the ticket that you hold, right? So I hope that some of you who have a ticket for the kickoff session will actually still decide to join the full program that starts tomorrow. All right? Now is the time to move to our keynote speaker for today. Andrew Sobel, last time I checked, has written 7 books. My God, it took me an eternity to write my first book. He's an author and speaker. He's joining us from the US, and he will talk to us about transforming relationships with power questions. And actually, Power Questions is the title of one of Andrew's books, the one that many coaches know very well. He will divulge to us the secrets of asking power questions. And there he is. Hello, Andrew. Can you hear me okay?
I can, Peter. Thank you.
Excellent. And really, we're honored to have you. And I'm sure the audience is all ready for you to find out what power questions are and how to ask them. Good luck, Andrew.
Fantastic. Thank you, Peter. I really appreciate being asked to be one of the keynote speakers for the World Institute for Action Learning annual conference. I'm going to spend the next about 30 minutes talking about what I call power questions, and it's the title of a book I wrote with Jerry Panis. So my objectives in this short session are for you to perhaps appreciate even more than you do today the importance of questions and the impact that what I call power questions can have. Secondly, I want to give you a framework for understanding what actually is a power question. So what's the difference between a really good question and a kind of average question? And then finally, I'm going to give you a tool which you can download at the end of my session to help you design your own power questions. So I'm going to jump right in, and I think it's appropriate for me to start this session with a question, which I want you to all think about. And it's a kind of strange question, but here we go. What do you think is the most widely quoted line in all of Western literature? Now, I say Western literature because that's what I know and also where I was able to do the Google research. But what do you think is the most widely quoted line? I'll give you some choices just to spice things up. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. That's Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities. Or how about the great American novel, Call Me Ishmael? That's Moby Dick. Or perhaps To Be or Not to Be. Or, and this one is tongue in cheek, I'll Be Back. That's, of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger in The Terminator. I'm just kidding, but seriously, what would you think here? What is the most widely quoted line? Well, I'll jump right to it, which is, it's to be or not to be. That is the question. And of course, it's Shakespeare in Hamlet. And the actual scene is Hamlet. It's late at night in the castle, and Hamlet is going to be or not to be. That is the big question for me. And what he's doing actually is contemplating suicide. He's thinking about, should I live or should I die? It's an existential crisis, and he's asking the big question. My point here is that our greatest thinkers, our greatest writers and artists and scientists, Einstein, for example, have always been much more concerned with questions than with easy answers. And so Einstein, for example, is quoted as saying, the important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing. And in fact, he once also said, if I had 1 hour to save the world, I would spend 59 minutes defining the problem and 1 minute resolving it. And another quote I love is from Picasso, probably the greatest artist of the 20th century. And Picasso said, he was being interviewed by a journalist in the 1960s who asked him about mainframe computers. And he said, what do you think of these new mainframe computers? There was the IBM 360 series. And the journalist said, aren't they amazing? And Picasso looked at him and said, computers are useless. They can only give you answers. So let me give you an example of the power of questions. I'm going to give you a couple of examples and stories as I go through this talk. A few years ago, I was at the year-end conference for a client of mine, and there was the CEO and 100 of his top executives in a big room. And I had been invited to sit in on the CEO's speech. I didn't really know him very well. His name was Tim, big, tall guy, about 6'7". And he went through a bunch of slides about the year in review. And then he said, "Are there any questions?" And people started raising their hands and asking, honestly, very banal, boring, backward-looking questions. They said, "Tim, could you go back to slide 14 and talk about the financial reserves that we took for this program? And Tim, could you go back to slide 10 and explain how you got to that?" and things like that. And Tim was just getting bored, honestly. And by the end of the questions, he was, I would say, deflated. And I was in the front row, and I raised my hand, and he said, "Andrew, last question." And I said, "Tim, I'm curious, of all the initiatives that you have going on in the corporation for the coming year, what are you personally most excited about?" I wasn't particularly brilliant that morning, but I asked him that question, and Tim suddenly stood up, he smiled, and he took a deep breath, and he said, "Well," and he began to talk for 5 minutes about a particular initiative that he was personally involved in and very passionate about. And he hadn't even mentioned it actually in his big talk to the executives. Well, when we were leaving the conference, there was a big crowd, and suddenly I felt this slap on my back. And I looked up, and there's Tim, standing. I'm about 6 feet tall. Tim's, 6'7". He's towering over me. He said, "Good question, Andrew. Thank you for that question." I said, "Sure." And then he walked on with his, whatever, handlers, bodyguards. And then he looked back at me and said, "Very revealing question." And then he said, "Call me." So I called him. And that was actually the beginning of my relationship with this CEO and my relationship with the client. So look, as I said, I wasn't particularly clever or brilliant that morning, but that little question I asked simultaneously achieved 3 shifts in the conversation. Think about this. What did that question do? What were the shifts? Well, first, it shifted us from the past to the future. Most executives are much more interested in growth and innovation and future plans than they are in dissecting the past. So that raised the energy. Secondly, it moved us from the details to the big picture. And again, most CEOs they have to know the details, but they're more concerned with the strategy and the sort of major thrusts of the business and so on. So that raised the energy. And then finally, that question shifted us from the rational to the emotional. So from the rational domain to the emotional domain, and I'll get into this. I'm going to give you a worksheet on this at the end. And again, emotional or personal questions, for example, instead of asking someone what they think, asking how they felt. That raises the energy level, gets people engaged. So those were some of the shifts that small question achieved. Now, what is the difference between what I would call an average question and a power question? So let me define a power question. By the way, there's no one definition. I've got 8 or 9 different characteristics, and no one question will have all these characteristics, of course, but this will give you a framework for helping to select your questions. So first of all, obviously, power questions are open-ended, not closed-ended. There are a few exceptions, but they are almost always open-ended. So if you say to your boss or to a client, "Are you concerned about the new regulatory framework?" The answer might be no. End of conversation. So rather, you might ask, how is the new regulatory framework impacting your planning and budgeting? Try to get the answers to closed-ended questions, to informational questions, like what is your market share? That's an informational closed-ended question. Try to get those before your meetings. All right, second, they are surprising. They're surprising. They make the other person sit up and think. You want the other person, whether it's your boss, a colleague, a friend, a customer you're talking to, you want them to sit up and think, wow, that's an interesting question. No one has asked me that before. So someone tells you a story about something that happened to them. You know, it's this long incident. That's what happened. That was a long week. And instead of just saying, well, you have my sympathies and moving on, you might turn to them and say, I'm curious, what did you learn from that experience, right? So you want to shake them up a bit. Sometimes that's a why question, right? So why do you think that happened? Anyway, I'd ask you to think about what are some of the surprising and effective questions that you've been asked. Think about that. What questions have you been asked that really made you sit up and go, wow, this is, I haven't been asked that before. Third, power questions focus the other person. They focus the conversation on the right issues. How do you do that? It's pretty simple. I might say so I have a consulting company, so I work with clients a lot. I might say to a client, this morning, I know we have an agenda and so on, but from your perspective, what's the most important issue we should be discussing this morning? Or I might say, what's the most valuable way for us to use this time? The point here is when you get the other person to say, here's what's important to me, again, the energy in the conversation goes way up instead of you imposing your agenda on them. A fourth potential characteristic of power questions is they help you uncover the other person's agenda. Now, I have a very special definition for agenda here. It's not your calendar. With a capital A, agenda is the other person's 3 to 5 most important needs, goals, or priorities. 3 to 5 most important needs, goals, or priorities. And it's not that easy sometimes to get people to reveal those. If you say to someone, hey, how are things going? Which is what we often say, they might say, great, I'm living the dream. But actually up in their head is a bubble saying, actually, I'm missing my goals and I'm afraid my boss is going to kill me. So I might ask someone, so I'm curious, what initiatives are you personally most involved with over the next 6 months? How are they going to be spending their time? Or I love this question. How are you going to be evaluated at the end of the year? I ask my clients this question all the time. How are you going to be evaluated? Like, what are the critical goals that your leadership is expecting you to accomplish this year? And sometimes I'll smile and say, well, I ask all my clients that question because I want to understand what's important to you so that I can be most helpful. Fifth, power questions help you identify root causes. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Sakichi Toyota and his 5 whys. And he told his production engineers, this goes back to the Toyota lean production system in the 80s that they developed. He told his engineers, if you ask why 5 times, you can uncover the root cause of any quality problem and probably the answer as well. So I've actually read some articles where people say, why is a bad question because it makes people feel bad or it sounds critical. I completely disagree. I think there are circumstances when why is a bad question. For example, don't ask a teenager or a young adult why when they've done something wrong. Why did you leave your laptop in the car overnight and so it could get stolen? Or why did you stay out late at night going to a party the night before your final exam? All you're saying to them is, why were you so stupid? But in business, I think why can be a very penetrating question. People often present symptoms. I'm not sleeping very well is the symptom, but I'm anxious about how my performance is being perceived at my new job. Obviously, that's now getting us to the root cause. Okay, a couple more. 6, power questions help you explore the full context. And I have a simple diagram I use. I teach my clients this. I call it the compass diagram, north, south, east, west. And north is strategy. So I ask questions about the strategic context for an initiative. East is enterprise-wide implications. So I will ask questions about, so what are the other parts of the organization that this initiative needs to align with? Or how is this going to impact sales? Or how is this going to impact the customer experience? So enterprise-wide, that's east. South is implementation or execution. What is your implementation timetable? Who are the key individuals who will be driving it? What metrics will you use to measure the success of your implementation, and so on? And then west, the other last direction in the compass, is change management. So I might ask questions about change management, about stakeholders and process and so on. So use power questions to explore the total context of the problem you're being presented with. And it will really bring to life the root causes. It will really expand the other person's horizons. A couple more. Power questions explore through self-assessment. And I think I heard one of the previous speakers talking about, using a scale of 1 to 10. I might ask a client, I'm curious, how would you rate your current customer experience, where 1 is poor and 5 is outstanding, highly differentiated? Rather than me telling them how lousy their customer experience is, when they self-assess, they're usually pretty honest, and they'll say to me, Andrew, honestly, it's about a 2 or 3 right now. I had a client who was the CEO of the division of a major bank. This was at the time an $8 billion business unit of this major bank. And I had breakfast with him once in the executive floor of their bank, and his team was a wreck. His team was dysfunctional. They didn't like each other. They constantly fought. They didn't get the strategy. And but this guy, Franco, who was the CEO, divisional CEO, he was super smart, and he didn't take advice easily. He didn't like to be told what to do at all. So instead of saying to him, Franco, I believe your team is dysfunctional. We need to look at this. I simply said to him, so Franco, how do you feel about your team right now? That's all. And he looked at me and said, well, and he got very defensive, and he went on for 5 full minutes. Well, this is a competitive organization, and people on my team are very ambitious, and so they do get into, and at the end, you know what he said to me? You're right, Andrew. I've got a problem with my team. I never said he had a problem with his team. I just said, Franco, how do you feel about your team? So in that case, he actually said to me, Andrew, could you go meet with my head of human resources? I'd really like you to give my team some coaching. So I accomplished an important goal there without, doing it directly. Okay, 2 more. Power questions build deep personal understanding. And remember, the more someone trusts you, the more they'll open up to you about their agenda. The more they open up to you about their agenda, the more value you can add and the more you can help them. Whether, again, that's a client or your boss or it's a colleague. And so one of my favorite questions is simply, how did you get your start? How'd you get your start? It invites someone to tell their story. I was at a meeting in New York once. It was an award ceremony, and there was a whole bunch of CEOs there, the CEO of Ford, the CEO of other Fortune 100 companies. And my host introduced me to this man who he introduced as the CEO of a big retailer, Fortune 100 company. I knew nothing about their business, but I did know he had grown up in Latin America. That fact came out in the introduction. And so what do you say? You're sitting there with a glass of wine, talking to the CEO of one of the largest companies in the United States. You don't really know much about their business. What am I going to say? Hey, how are the stores doing? And I looked at him and I said, I'm curious, how did a young man from Argentina wind up in the C-suite of one of the top companies in the United States? And I smiled, and he said, and he began telling me his whole story about how he first came to the States, of his first job, how he worked his way up. We eventually exchanged business cards and got in touch after that meeting. He talked for 20 minutes about his journey. And it was that simple question, asking, I'm curious, how'd you get your start? Finally, last characteristic. So as you can see, there's lots of different types of power questions that you can ask. Power questions sometimes ask what if, and they create space for new ideas and new approaches. if you had more resources, Peter, for your institute, what could you accomplish? You know, well, maybe if we had a full-time this, or maybe if we had a marketing person, or they create space. Give you an example. A client of mine, one of the big accounting firms, he was a partner, went to meet with the head of a private equity firm. And the head of the private equity firm said to him, listen, we want to sell this company fast. And I have a little project for you to do, but I want it quick and dirty. It's going to take a week, you know, and this is all I'm willing to pay you. So let's get to work. And the partner said, well, and he had actually been through a program, you know, a seminar like this on questions. And he said to the PE executive, well, normally we would also do these two other projects to help prepare an asset for sale. And the PE executive said, nah, I just want you to do this small little thing. And so the partner said, okay, I have a question. Hypothetically, just hypothetically, if you had more time to prepare this company for sale, if you had a longer time frame, I'm curious what additional improvements or changes would you make in it to achieve a higher valuation in the marketplace? Silence. Now, an important point here, friends, is silence is okay. You can allow silence. Let the other person talk. You know, in sales, we used to have an expression, he who speaks first is lost. So my friend, my client, let there be silence. And the PE executive started going, you know what? I want you to give me a proposal for all three of those projects. And bam, in a minute, no, actually in a few seconds, my client had transformed what was basically a quick and dirty job for a small fee, where the client was focused on just the, you know, keeping the expenses low, to a much larger fee, a much larger scope of the project, whose goal was to maximize market value. So again, use power questions to create this what if space. Some of you, I know, are consultants and probably have your own practices or work for companies that do. And there are three questions I find when I'm talking to an executive. There are three questions that can really help drive like a 1-hour conversation. And they're very simple. And the first one, ask them about their goals and aspirations for X. You know, it could be, what are your goals and aspirations for the training function? Or it could be, what are your goals and aspirations for your North American business? Or what are your goals and aspirations for your digital transformation? Whatever it is. Get them to talk about that. And then you say, so what kinds of capabilities would you need in place? Financial resources, people, technology, whatever it is, what kinds of resources do you need in place to help you accomplish those aspirations? And then the third question is, so I'm curious, what's the gap between the capabilities you need and your current organization? What does that look like? Those three simple questions can really drive a very energetic and frankly exciting conversation with a senior executive. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention something else. Let me ask you another question. I have heard and I have read often, there are no bad questions. There are no bad questions. Every question, any question is a good question. What do you think about that statement? Do you think that's true or false? True or false? There are no bad questions. Well, I'll give you my perspective on it. There are definitely bad questions. There's some terrible questions. So for example, can I give you one? So what's keeping you up at night? You know, if you're in any kind of marketing or sales or business development, that's overused. It's a cliche. Salespeople have been asking that for 40 years. So it's a problem question, not an opportunity question. It's a lazy question. You've done no preparation whatsoever. Instead of saying, I listened to your CEO's speech last month to your investor community, and I'm curious how your shift in strategy is going to impact your investment priorities in human resources or whatever. But what keeps you up at night? Another one, which isn't bad, but it's so cliched, it's what will success look like? Oh, if I hear another consultant say to a client, what will success look like? Ask it differently. Ask, when this program is finished, if it's successful, what changes will you see in the organization? What new behaviors will you see would you like to see at the culmination of this program? Another one that was years ago written up in a book, it was, and this guy said it was his secret weapon. So at the end of a conversation, you say, so what question haven't I asked that I should have asked? Now, let me tell you what's wrong with that, especially in kind of a sales situation or a marketing situation. You're basically it's smarmy. You're being too familiar with the person. You're trying to put yourself on the same side of the desk as them and say, give me a little coaching so I can do a better job at selling to you. So those are some questions that I'm not personally keen on. So be careful. And also, as I said, don't ask teenagers and young adults why they did something that was stupid, because all you're saying to them is, why were you so stupid? You're not really trying to unpack what's going on. So let me wrap up, because I know, Peter, I think I had about 30 minutes, and I know we're coming up to 5 after the hour here. Let me conclude. Bring 3 good questions to every meeting. Every meeting internally, every meeting externally, 3 thoughtful questions. Look, friends, this takes time to invest in those 3. You don't need more than 3. You don't need 20 questions. You might find you never get to the 3rd one, but match them up against the list I've talked through. Second, and I think I heard this as an attribute of action learning, turn statements into questions. Instead of making these pronouncements, turn it into a question. Third, practice questions with family and friends. This isn't just for your business life. This is for your personal life as well. You will be surprised at how you can enrich relationships with your family and friends by just starting to ask them some more questions about themselves. Fourth, be relaxed and smile when you ask questions. Don't tense up, and go, we're just wondering, just smile, be natural. Finally, remember that you don't want to ask too many questions. Don't just pepper people with questions. Great relationships are based on great conversations, not one person showing the other how much they know or how smart they are. So your questions should be leading to a great to and fro with the other person, not just question, take notes, question, and so on. That's a cliche about consultants. They come in, they ask lots of questions, take notes, and then they leave. So I'm going to leave you with an action step, and it's a worksheet which you could download right here on the site. And it's a matrix. I call it the Power Questions Matrix. And basically, in this matrix, now this is not every type of power question, but it'll get you started. So I think about rational versus emotional. Remember Tim, my client, who got really passionate with that question. Rational versus emotional, and then implementation or details versus the big picture. All consultants love 2x2 matrices. I'm no exception. So you get 4 quadrants you can ask questions in: execution, strategy, dreams, and fears. And I'll tell you right away, most of you will be very used to asking questions in the execution and strategy quadrants, and this is all on the worksheet. But fewer of you will ask questions in the dreams quadrant. So, an execution question is what's your timeline for this project? Who's going to be involved? Strategy might be, how is your new strategy to transform the customer experience impacting the training function? Dreams questions are aspirations, passion, values, legacy. What are your dreams? What more would you like to accomplish? What legacy would you like to leave? These will be your richest conversations with other people. I guarantee you, it raises the energy, it gets them engaged. And then there's fears questions too, which is, what are your frustrations, anxieties? What do you think are some of the risks of this program? And so on. So while I want you to ask questions in all 4 quadrants, I'd like you to get more adventurous in asking people about, especially what's the upper right quadrant in my worksheet, their dreams questions, and then also some of their fears questions, because these will be powerful conversations that will really deepen your relationships with the other person. Well, Peter, I think I've used up my time. Thank you again so much for inviting me to speak at your conference, your annual conference. I'll look forward to getting feedback from any of you. And also in the worksheet, I've included both my website, where I have almost 400 articles on relationship building. You can download the worksheet, and also any questions, or if you want to get in touch, my email is on that sheet as well, and I'd love to hear from you.
Thanks a lot, Andrew. I'm sure people could keep listening to you for another half hour. I looked at the audience during your talk, and I saw 2 kind of participants, those that were taking notes like crazy, and then others that were just sitting there and smiling most of the time. Now,
good.
As for me, I've already prepared 3 questions to take home, not to my next meeting, but to take home tonight, later when I go home, 3 powerful questions to try and work out with my wife. I really appreciate you joining us. It's very early for you, Andrew. Appreciate you joining us early this morning, US time, and thanks for sharing all your knowledge in the session today. Take care, Matt.
You're so welcome.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. That was a really inspiring talk, and I'm sure that whether you're an action learning coach or not, asking more powerful questions with the examples that Andrew gave using his framework, his 2x2 matrix, can help all of us. Now, before we go to the second panel discussion of today, I'm going to take a few more minutes to highlight one more key element of WIAL's organization. So can I have my slide, please? And that is the Better World. B. Carson mentioned that WIAL Better World was started 6 years ago. Now, in WIAL, we really believe that action learning changes the world for the better. One team at a time, one session at a time, one challenge at a time. And so 6 years ago, we started the WIAL Better World Fund. And we just updated our website. You can see this as one of the tabs on our website. We want to give the possibility for organizations, especially community-based organizations or individuals that need support to be able to use action learning. And there is 3 key pillars of the WIAL Better World Fund. That is to nominate people or organizations who are in need of action learning and can use some support in doing so. And actually, I take this opportunity to say hello to the 5 winners of the scholarships. 5 individuals have received scholarships to join the full program this week. We're very happy that you're with us, and we hope this conference will help you continue to learn around action learning. The second way to contribute to the Better World Fund is to get involved as pro bono coach. We do a lot of pro bono coaching, and I'll talk about that more in the next step. And finally is to donate. We invite individuals, organizations to donate so that the WIAL Better World Fund can help more organizations that are in need of it. Catherine Geacock and Mike Marquardt will come back and talk more about the WIAL Better World Fund tomorrow. Of course, we all know that the last 2 years have been very special and traumatic for many organizations. So in April last year, the WIAL board decided to start the WIAL Gives Back initiative, where we invited coaches to offer their pro bono action learning services to help beneficiaries. There's been tens of organizations, very small ones to larger ones, that have used pro bono coaches to help them with the challenges they're facing, and of course, learn at the same time. Many small organizations, but also very big ones, such as the International Federation for the Red Cross. And we will see testimonials, I think on Friday, of how WIAL pro bono action learning has helped several of the Red Cross countries. The final point I want to share with you is to give a little bit of information about how WIAL is organized. We have a board of directors. They are right here. They are Shannon from the UK, Sudeep from the US, Ruby from Jamaica, Mary from the US, Issa from Singapore, Tuan from the Netherlands, Kokwa from Singapore, Mies from the United States, Catherine from the UK, Rick from the UK, Marcia from Brazil, and Roger from Canada. And we are supported by an executive director, Mark Relova. So I want to thank all these individuals because they contribute their time, their experience, their ideas to help WIAL continue to grow. And in addition to the WIAL board, we have a number of committees. We have smaller groups that work on particular topics related to certification, marketing, coaches, education, fundraising, scholarships and grants, and affiliates. And finally, we are supported by the WIAL Advisory Board, a group of senior professionals that help us with advice and good ideas when we need them. And I want to show this slide before I wrap up and move to the next panel, because we always are interested to have individuals join WIAL either as board members or as committee members. So if there is one of the topics on the list here that you're passionate about, you want to contribute to help WIAL grow, do reach out to our general email, info@wial.org, and we'll make sure to treat your request and send it in the right direction. Finally, one more time, you can still buy tickets for the full program for the next 3 days. So those of you who are about to end because they only have a kickoff session ticket, you can change your mind and sign up for the whole program. And finally, do make sure to use the Whova platform. I saw a lot of chats already going on. The community has woken up 2 days ago, a lot of exchanges of information. Andrew Sobel posted his document of his session there. There's other people that share information. Make sure to make the best use of the Whova platform so we can all benefit from that. Okay, and that brings me to the final step of the program this evening. We're going to have a panel discussion about the future of WIAL. We've talked about the history and the beginnings. Now we're going to see what's in store for the next year. I'm very happy to welcome Mies de Koning from the United States and Marcia Yokota from Brazil. Unfortunately, Mary cannot make it due to a personal bereavement, so we wish her all the best. It's a pity she cannot be with us. But I'm going to welcome Mies and Marcia from the United States and Brazil, respectively. So, welcome, panelists. We're going to talk, of course, about the future, but before we do that, I want to invite you to say a little bit about yourself, without talking about the WIAL committees per se, and especially linking what I just said. What made you join the WIAL board? Both of you have been on the WIAL board for a while. So what should participants know about you, professionally, personally, and what made you join the WIAL board? Let me start with Mies first. Let me see him. I think, Mies, we cannot hear you. Are you unmuted?
Now I am.
Now you are. There you go.
I was just starting by saying, Peter, before I answer the question, I just wanted to say what an amazing job the WIAL Thailand team has done in organizing this conference.
Thank you.
Congratulations. It's really impressive. So I joined the WIAL board 2 years ago as the Director of Education, which has been a great experience from the start. It's been really inspirational to help kind of continue to build WIAL and to create the future of WIAL with a really cool team of professionals around the world. When I joined, I was working at a local organization in New York City, and I was really excited to build more international connections, and the board work really enabled me to do that. Currently, I am a managing director at the Rockefeller Foundation on the HR team, and next to that job, when a fun opportunity comes up, I also work as a senior action learning coach. Marcia, you're up next.
Excellent. Marcia, what about you?
Hello. So I'm talking from Brazil, São Paulo, Brazil. I'm a career and executive and team coach, and I'm also a senior action learning coach. Actually, action learning was love at first session in 2015. And I waited for over a year to have my certification in WIAL Action Learning. And right after I was engaged with WIAL Brazil, and then invited myself to be part of the marketing committee. And for 1 year now, I've been part of the board. And what motivates me is to contribute so that WIAL Action Learning can benefit more people and teams and organizations all over the world.
Cool.
And also,
I love
to
what
learn
you
with
said,
my
love at first session. I never heard that before. I love the way you put that. Keep going.
and also learn with my colleagues and team members.
All right. Thanks, Marcia. So you mentioned, both of you, the committee you're working in. I'm going to stay with Marcia for a minute. You're in the marketing committee. Before we talk about the future, what are the most recent developments in the marketing committee that the participants should know about? And then, Mies, I'm going to ask you the same question about the education committee. So Marcia, marketing committee, what's new?
I think the biggest, most significant achievement was the rebranding. So we can see right there the new WIAL logo. It's been up for almost a year now, but it's not the rebranding by itself. Everything that it brought together. So the mission was revised. We reviewed the vision, the logos, and our social media presence. And lately, this year, we launched the WIAL digital badges for the certified coaches. I think those were the big things.
I think we have all seen those digital badges online popping up on Facebook and LinkedIn. Definitely a good visibility for our coaches. So, Mies, Education Committee, what's new?
So what's new is that, well, we've been working on it for a while now, but we're very close to launching a kind of a revamped calc curriculum. So this is the course that people all around the world take to become certified as action learning coaches. This course is being delivered by lots of people and affiliates and senior and master action learning coaches around the world. And what we've done is, in order to promote more consistent practices in calc certification, we've created an online start to that curriculum, which will happen in a new global platform, which will become available. And the whole course, which previously was delivered either in the classroom or virtually, but also included lots of PowerPoint presentations and analog presenting, will now include kind of a very mixed media blended curriculum.
Cool.
So we're coming out with that soon.
Yes, we are. I know you've been working on that very hard. And now, on behalf of Mary Volz-Peacock, who cannot be with us in this panel discussion, the certification committee has also made great progress in standardizing really the review of the papers that calc candidates submit. I think the process we have today is more rigorous, gives better feedback to the coaches so they can take it as an input for their own continuous learning. All right. Now, Mies, this time I'm going to stay with you. Education committee for the next 12 months. So what's in store that organizations, individuals can look forward to from WIAL's education committee?
From the education committee. So as said, we're close to kind of wrapping up the development of this new curriculum. We've had great help from the affiliate in India and in the Philippines to pilot it. We just received that feedback. So this whole new curriculum will be wrapped up during the fall, and then we'll start implementing that curriculum in all English-speaking areas where WIAL is active starting January. And then the other thing for the next 12 months is to work with our vendor, our e-learning vendor, and with local affiliates that practice in different languages other than English to work on translations, adding those to the platform and really working towards one global blended curriculum. That's mostly what's on the agenda.
Cool. So WIAL Calc blended format in any language, anywhere around the world. That's going to be a great milestone to achieve. So Marcia, what about the marketing committee? You already talked a lot about great stuff that we've seen out there. What can we expect for the short-term future from the marketing committee?
There is a series of webinars that have been going on to support certified coaches in their marketing, their own branding, and then promoting their services. So 2 webinars have already been done, and there is one more coming up, and we have one webinar planned per month or every 5 weeks. So the next one will be about LinkedIn. And so each one will be focusing on a specific topic with a person from our committee or outside the WIAL community that is specialized in this topic.
Cool. And I also want to add that we now start to have video testimonials. There's been a few that have been posted last month and just a few days ago. So we're going to try to get more video testimonials out there so that people who've really used action learning in their organization share about the impact it had. Now, before we talk about the long-term future, this is going to be a challenge at this time of the day. I'm going to ask you to predict the next 15 years for WIAL. But before we do that, I want to ask you a question. I think, Marcia, you mentioned love at first session, right? And I had the quote from Bob from Australia earlier that when people experience an action learning session, they get it. And the magic, what did he write? The magic works every time. So everybody who experiences action learning is just blown away. But at the same time, we have to admit that lots of organizations still don't know action learning, even the OD departments or the L&D departments. What do you think, I'm going to start with Marcia for this one, what do you think is the main reason that so many organizations do not yet know this fantastic thing called action learning?
Well, I think the experience is the key. So the description, it seems that the description, when we describe action learning, it's not possible to have the idea of what the experience feels like. So the experience is much more complex than the description can grab. So even though action learning is very simple, only 2 ground rules, right? It's very complex in the sense of what you get from a session. So I see it as many layers in learning, in the action that people take, and because there are so many theories and so many details and questions that are there for a reason. So nothing is there without explanation. There is something that's explaining why is it there. And it's simple, so it requires some creativity, as somebody just said, to adequate. So it requires the coach to develop a program that fits what the organization or the team needs. So it's a mix of expertise and creativity to understand what is needed. So I'm not sure if I answered your question.
I think you did. So I get that the key is to just get people into a session. And this is a reminder of what I said earlier. If any of you in the audience have not ever been in an action learning session, do contact us, info@wial.org, and we'll make it happen. Now, Mies, I want to get your thoughts about that. Why do you think action learning is still so relatively unknown in a number of organizations?
It's a great question. I think part of it, part of the answer must be that there is a great landscape of competing and sometimes equally impressive methodologies out there that we compete with over attention. I think one way to get people more exposed to action learning, I think, would be to bring action learning into higher education. So also as a method that can be used not only in business or organizations, the way we often promote it, but I think action learning could have a much, much wider application, also in communities, in an educational setting, really in a local community setting. I think we could infiltrate all of those kind of niches much better to expose more people to it.
Okay, thank you for sharing your thoughts. The last question of the session and of the evening is the $1 million question. How do you see WIAL and WIAL Action Learning in 15 years from now? We saw where it started 15 years ago. So where do you see WIAL Action Learning, I'm not asking about yourself, WIAL and WIAL Action Learning, in 15 years from now? So Mies, this time I start with you, and again I have the last word to Marcia. Mies.
Thank you. Thanks, Peter. I gave this a lot of thought, obviously, preparing for this session. And I thought, in order to look into the future and understand the future, we first have to understand our past. Action learning pre-WIAL has been around for a long time. I think we teach since the 1940s or 1950s, originally of the past century. Of course, there was lots of development since then, but the concept has been around, and I think it stood the test of time so far until today, and I think it will in the future. But three things, I think, to really understand about action learning and to hold on to as we move forward are, first, that action learning is for professionals and practitioners in organization. That could be any level, but that's who we are servicing here with this method. And with that, I think people today and in the 15 years increasingly will become more and more tired of the managerial and business rhetoric of the 90s and the early 2000s. And I think action learning is a solution for that. Second, I would say that action learning is about this statement from Reg Revans, who said, the ultimate power of a successful staff lies not in the brilliance of individuals, but in collective abilities. So it is about collective abilities rather than individual abilities. That is also something to really keep in mind as we think about the future for WIAL, because people are really, really craving, I think, in societies, but also in organizations around the world, solutions that are not hierarchical, that are community-oriented, and that are inclusive. And at the same time, challenge, like I just said, managerial rhetoric, but also processes that are critical of science and scientific answers to questions. WIAL has all of that. And I think WIAL has the opportunity over the next 15 years to really become an enabler of creating more just, more inclusive, and more kind of empowered workforces and communities around the world. I think that's what the big opportunity is that we're facing as the WIAL community.
Yeah, excellent thoughts. So another illustration of action learning really making a better world. Marcia, your prediction for the next 15 years of WIAL as a wrap-up of this kickoff session.
Prediction. Well, I think I just want to make a note before saying the opportunities, is that I think WIAL is, and WIAL action learning needs the collaboration to evolve in this 15 years. So what you said about the volunteers for me is key. We want and we need inputs and contributions from country affiliates and certified coaches, either in research, either in work and collaboration in inputs. And so I just want to add to what you said. And I think it's very important for our future. So team coaching is a demand that is increasing, and also an offering that is increasing for organization and leaders and teams. So this is a huge opportunity for WIAL action learning, in my point of view. The virtual world without frontiers is there. We have developed during the pandemic, and we have seen this happen in the WIAL community of coaches. A lot of coaches that did not have expertise or experience in virtual action learning developed it very fast and were able to help and contribute to their clients and communities. And what I see is that related to what Mies said, that problems are there. So they were there when we arrived, and they're going to continue to be present in our lives, professionally, personally, community, in our community, societies, and so on. So we'll need methodologies that engage people in solving them in the best way they can. And I think WIAL Action Learning does help us in that and can support so in many different spaces and different groups and teams. And an opportunity also that I see is that there are also a lot different skills that are required to be developed in different contexts. And for example, a research that was done here in Brazil, calm appeared to be the most desired skill after the pandemic. So, and a lot of participants in action learning sessions want to develop patience that I relate to calm. So the context changes, but we as human beings want to keep evolving, transforming, adapt to the context that we live in. And action learning can help us develop our skills in this way.
Wow, I have to say, I'm impressed by both your answers, and I'm very happy I was the one to ask the question instead of having to answer the question. I really enjoyed your thoughts about what's in store for the future, and I can only endorse everything you said. So thank you for spending your time with us in this panel discussion. Again, our best goes to Mary, who unfortunately cannot be with us. We send you our love, Mary. Thank you, Mies. Thank you, Marcia. And I hope you will continue to stay with us for the rest of the program. Thank you.
Thank you.
And this brings us to the end of our kickoff session. Now, before we all run away, I want to once more bring in the audience view, please. So can you please switch on your cameras for those of you who have not switched on your cameras, so we can do a big global wave all the way from America, where it's probably close to lunchtime now, to Europe, Middle East and Africa, where it's kind of middle of the afternoon, and in Asia, where it's very, very late. I can see a few of you. Is that you in your PJs or getting ready to go to bed? I understand it is quite late for some of us in Asia. I had a blast. I hope you learned something new about WIAL, about action learning. Thanks for all the speakers, panelists. Stay safe. See most of you. I hope to see all of you tomorrow. The time is a little bit different. We have a full program of 7 hours of sharing information, sharing knowledge. So again, thank you all of you. Let's do a big global wave, silent wave. And I look forward to see all of you for the day one of the program tomorrow. Take care, everybody.